Hey, my name is Steve, composer, engineer and lecturer. Welcome back to the channel and your first steps into Logic Pro. In this course, we aim to introduce you to the software application Logic Pro and all of the basic features you need to get started creating music today. We have already covered off the basics, the introduction, the layout, as well as audio tracks and software/MIDI instruments. Now is our opportunity to take a look at the signal flow within Logic Pro, understand how all the tracks are mixing together and how we can use automation and audio plugins to help shape our mix. So let's dive on in. All right, so we've taken a look at the inspector and the mixer, and we've seen some things that are on there, right? Like we've seen some audio effects that are on there, like EQs, compressors, reverbs, delays, other sorts of fun little things. We've also seen these buses or sends. It's now time to clear up a little bit of this information. First of all, let's take a look at how the audio passes through the DAW. So we're gonna open up the mixer, just X on my keyboard, or of course the button at the top here. And we can see all of our channels, and they're the same tracks as the ones that we've got obviously in our track workspace. They're all just there from left to right, which is the top to bottom. So on here we can see, for example, the two guitars have a number of audio effects. And these are audio effects or processors that are changing the sound somehow. Now the intention of that sound change is up to you. It could be more creative in nature, such as the guitar rig at the top here. If I open that one up, this plugin is actually what is creating the guitar-like sound. I plugged my guitar straight into my audio interface, so it certainly wasn't going through an amp or a guitar pedal board or anything like that. So this Native Instruments plugin called Guitar Rig is actually what's doing that sound for me. So that's more of a creative use of my audio plugins. However, if I open up this plugin here, the Neutron 3 Equalizer, this is just an EQ. It's something that I've used to help mix this guitar in with all the other instruments, carving out a bit of space for this and that, adding a little bit of a presence boost to give it some character. So how you use those audio effects is entirely up to you. The order of those audio effects, though, is very important. So the guitar, for example, has the guitar rig first, which creates a sound, and then what comes afterwards or below it is the very next thing in the chain. The audio is going to pass through each one separately and in series. So the guitar rig sound will come out and it will then go through the EQ, which will shape that, and then it's going through a compressor from Waves. All of that is then being sent through an output, and the output is going to stereo out, my 1 and 2. Those 1 and 2 is actually connected to my speakers, so it's going straight to the speakers. There is a stereo out channel though, and we can see that over here, stereo out. So everything that has an output to stereo out, which is pretty much everything at the moment, is all going to this one master channel. The reason we have this channel here is we can put audio effects on this channel too. So if we wanted to put an EQ or a compressor or reverb or whatever on here, we can. Putting stuff on the stereo out is not normally advisable. That is something that you would do at a mastering stage more likely, or at the very final stages of a mix, most likely. So tend to steer clear of that channel. But all of these channels are all going through to the stereo output. So they're passing through the audio effects, heading on to be mixed together in the stereo output. It is worth mentioning that mixing itself is an art form. It's its own craft, and it's something that people spend years developing their critical listening and mixing skills in order to make your music sound the best it can be. If that's something you want to pursue, I definitely encourage you to do so. Particularly if you're a musician, it can be really helpful to have some mixing knowledge. It actually ends up helping out your compositions a little bit, but it's also a great skill to have for your own music so you can mix it yourself and don't have to wait for someone else to be available or pay a lot of money to do that. You can get things up and running yourself and start sharing your music straight away. But if you are going down the mixing path, do make sure you do some research, check into it, and expect that you're going to spend some time learning and developing that as its own craft. Now there is this sends thing that's happening over here, and this is an interesting part of DAWs. Essentially what a send does is it helps split off a bit of the channel and send it to something else. This is great for reverbs or delays or even distortions or things that you want a lot of your tracks to go to. Let's imagine it, reverb for example, which is in the case of this production. I have one reverb track and I wanted a bunch of instruments to go through that reverb. Rather than putting the same reverb plugin and copying and pasting it on every single channel, what I've done is I've sent a little bit of each channel out to this bus. This bus has on it the reverb plugin. And I can just turn up or down the amount of reverb that I want to send. A really, really cool technique. If you wanted to create a new bus for, say, like a second reverb or a delay or something else, I could click on here and I'm basically wanting to send it somewhere. I could send it to an output directly, but that's not going to be much use. What I want to do is send it to a bus. If I say send to bus 10, it's going to create a brand new channel over here. And I could put something on here like a delay. Just pop in tape delay or something like that. A little bit of Logic's pattern. And then if I send a little bit over to here, let's have a listen to see what that sounds like. I'm going to solo up this, start playing it, and we'll see what it sounds like. So you can hear that delay now coming through as I turn that up. I've obviously turned it up by quite a bit so you can hear it, but this is often best done with subtle effects, like a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay to add character and space. So it could be something that's really useful. Essentially what's happening here is the main channel strip is still going straight to the stereo output. We're just carving a little bit off and sending it. It's sort of like a splitter. It's almost like a power board or something like that. We're just splitting off a little bit and sending it down the bus, and that bus will then send what it does to the stereo output. So we've sort of got one channel coming in, breaks away, goes through both the bus and the main channel, and meets again at the stereo output. Now there are many effects plugins, many different audio plugins that you can use. As I mentioned, there's some that are more creative, some that are more sort of designed for mixing. It's really up to you how you use them. The great thing is there might be an effect that you want some of the time or to add a little bit of movement to. Or in general, you want tracks to maybe pan left to right over time or turn up the volume over time or something like that. This is where automation steps in and it's absolutely fantastic. If I hide my mixer for a second, and I turn on the automation in my main track workspace, you can see here I've already got some automation on the go. I'm going to open up some of these tracks as well, and you can even see some more down here. Now let's take a look at these first two tracks here, the guitar parts. What happened here is I've got some automation for pan. I've been able to select from a list and say pan automation, I want to do something to this track. So what this basically means, if I zoom in a little bit here, is that the middle line would be center panned, and it's either going right as it is or going left when I put it higher. But this track at the moment is panned all to the right, at least a majority of it, which means that we can mostly hear it coming through our right speaker. But towards the end here, I wanted it to move back to the middle. So I've been able to add points just with the mouse, just clicking there and then able to drag that point like so to create something. I'm just going to undo that obviously because I don't want that right now, but that's how I just created this simple change. And then if I hit play, we can see that it changes the panning position over time. I might even make it really obvious for a moment just so we can really hear the effect. So you can hear how it really moved across. So these sorts of automated movement can really bring life to your track and help kind of overcome some mixing issues potentially as well. On this same track, I've actually got another channel of automation designed literally to fix a mixing issue. If I open up this little disclosure triangle here, we can see a second lane. And that's very easy. As I hover over each lane, I can hit plus and create even more lanes and close them when I don't need them. This is still on the same track, so we can still see the same track. It's kind of conveniently put the same region below just so we can see and line things up more easily. But this lane is now doing volume. And that's because there's a huge reverb that ends at the end of this track, and I don't want that ringing out forever, so I've dipped the volume down. So let's have a listen to this. We'll now hear the pan working and the volume going down to reduce the reverb. So a really useful skill, something that is really going to bring a lot of life and movement to your tracks, and something that could even affect plugins. So if we actually jump down and take a look at this one that's going down here, this is attached to something called frequency. Well, what's frequency, you might ask? Well, it's actually looking at this particular plugin. This is a plugin from Soundtoys called Filter Freak. It's basically a filter, and I've attached automation to this frequency knob. Now I'm going to play this. It's just a single sample of a cymbal reversed, and watch this frequency knob as we move through it. So all this is doing is just shaping the tone a little bit. But rather than me have to play that every single time, which you would have to do in an analog studio where you didn't have automation, I can program it in so it does it every time without me having to think about it. Really wonderful and really powerful tool that enables you to have a lot more movement and control in your mix. A lot of fine adjustments, a lot of really cool stuff. Using audio effects and automation can really bring a creative edge to your music production, but also clarity to your mix. Practice makes perfect though, and mixing is its own art form, and it's something that you develop over time. So if you want to be a better mix engineer, now is the time to get started practicing your craft. In the next video, we're going to take a look at how to manage your session, how to export your files, and get them ready for distribution. This is also a really important step if you plan on collaborating with someone, because you want those files to work perfectly when they're received by the other person. So do click that subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next one.